The darkness between galaxies held secrets that most civilizations would never discover. In this vast emptiness, where stars were distant pinpricks and worlds were impossibly far apart, a fleet emerged from the void. Thousands of ships, each one bearing the scars of countless years in the deep black, moved together in perfect silence. Commander Jinseo stood on the bridge of the flagship Endurance, watching the distant glow of the Milky Way galaxy grow brighter on the viewing screen. She was tall and lean, her dark eyes reflecting the light of a billion stars. Her black hair, streaked with silver despite her relatively young age of 70, was pulled back in a simple braid. By the standards of her people, she was barely middle-aged. Humans lived much longer now than their ancient ancestors had. "We're approaching the outer markers," reported Lieutenant Park Min-jun from his station. 60,000 years since our people left. "We're finally back." Jinseo nodded slowly. 60,000 years. The number was almost impossible to comprehend, yet every child in the fleet knew it by heart. 60,000 years since Earth died. 60,000 years since humanity fled into the dark. She closed her eyes and remembered the stories. Every human child learned them from birth, passed down through 3,000 generations. The stories told of a beautiful blue world called Earth, where humanity was born. They told of green forests and vast oceans, of mountains that touched the sky and deserts that stretched beyond sight. They told of the day the Krell came. The Krell Dominion had arrived without warning. Their war fleets had filled Earth's sky like a swarm of locusts. They had demanded surrender, and when humanity refused, they had burned the world. Cities turned to ash. Oceans boiled away. The atmosphere itself had been stripped away by weapons that humanity couldn't begin to understand. But some humans had escaped. A handful of generation ships, barely finished and never properly tested, had fled into deep space. Only 5 ships had made it out of the solar system. 5 ships carrying 50,000 humans, all that remained of a species that had numbered in the billions. Those 5 ships had fled not just into space, but away from the galaxy itself. They had traveled into the void between galaxies, where no one would follow, where no one would find them. And there, in that terrible emptiness, humanity had survived. "Commander, we're receiving telemetry from the scout ships," said Min-jun. "They've been inside Krell territory for 3 months now. The data is interesting." Jinseo opened her eyes. "Show me." The screen changed, displaying maps and information gathered by the scouts. The Krell Dominion had grown. It now controlled thousands of star systems, spanning a quarter of the galaxy. They had become the dominant power, crushing or absorbing every other species they encountered. "They're powerful," observed Captain Lee Hae-won, Jinseo's second-in-command. "More powerful than when they destroyed Earth." "But complacent," Jinseo replied. She pointed at the tactical display. "Look at their border defenses. Minimal. Their fleet deployments are concentrated in the core systems, focused inward. They're not expecting threats from outside." "Why would they?" Hae-won asked. "According to our intelligence, they've had no serious rivals for 10,000 years. They think they're invincible." Jinseo allowed herself a small, cold smile. "They think we're extinct. They think humanity is just a footnote in their history books, a primitive species they wiped out when they were young." She turned to face her crew. "They don't know what 60,000 years in the dark does to a species. They don't know what it means to spend 3,000 generations with nothing but survival and the memory of home. They don't know what we've become." And humanity had become something new. The long journey, as they called it, had changed them. Living in the void between galaxies, with limited resources and no hope of finding new worlds, they had adapted. Human genetics had been carefully modified over millennia. Not for war, but for survival. Humans lived longer now, healed faster, needed less. Their minds had been shaped by the vastness of space, learning to think in terms of centuries rather than years. Their technology had evolved, too. When you have nothing but time and the materials of your ships, you learn to make every atom count. Human engineering had become incredibly efficient. Their ships were smaller than Krell vessels but faster, more maneuverable, more deadly. Their weapons were based on principles the Krell had never encountered, developed in isolation over thousands of generations. Send the signal to the fleet, Jin So commanded. All ships are to maintain dark running procedures. No active sensors, no communications except via quantum link. We move silently until I give the word. Yes, Commander, Ming Jun replied. Jin Seo walked to the large window at the front of the bridge. Before her, the Milky Way galaxy hung in space like a spiral of light. Somewhere in there, hidden among a billion stars, was a small yellow sun. Orbiting that sun was a dead world that had once been called Earth. Hey, one, she said quietly. Do you ever wonder if this is right? If revenge is worth it? The captain came to stand beside her. He was older than Jin So, over 100 years old, and his face bore the lines of a lifetime spent in service. Every day, he admitted. But then I remember the stories. I remember what they took from us. Not just Earth, but our chance to grow naturally, to explore the stars in peace. They took our future, and now we're taking it back, Jin Seo said. Are we here for revenge? Haewon asked. Or justice? Is there a difference? I think there is. Revenge is about making them hurt. Justice is about making them answer for what they did. This form, Jin Seo was quiet for a long moment. Then we're here for justice. We're here to remind the galaxy that humanity existed, that we mattered, that you can't just erase a species and forget about it. We're here to show them that we survived. She turned back to the crew. All ships, prepare for entry into the galaxy. Set course for the outer Krell territories. Silent running until further notice. Remember your training. Remember your purpose. Remember Earth. The crew responded with quiet efficiency. There were no battle cries, no excitement. Just calm, professional determination. This was what they had trained for. This was what 3,000 generations had prepared for. The remnant fleet, as they called themselves, began to move forward. Thousands of ships, carrying millions of humans. All the descendants of those original 50,000 refugees. They moved like shadows, sliding between the stars, heading toward the heart of the Krell Dominion. Commander Jin Seo watched them go, her reflection ghostly in the window. Behind her was 60,000 years of exile. Ahead was something she couldn't quite name. Not revenge. Not exactly justice either. Perhaps it was simply time to come home. The capital world of the Krell Dominion was called Krell Prime. And it was magnificent. Towers of crystal and metal reached into the purple sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float on nothing but air. The planet housed 50 billion Krell, and every one of them believed they lived at the center of the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. Ambassador Vex Karn stood in the Hall of Conquests, a museum dedicated to the Dominion's military victories. He was old. Even by Krell standards, his scaled skin faded to a pale green, and his crest drooping slightly with age. But his mind was still sharp. And today that sharp mind was troubled. He stood before a display that most visitors passed without a second glance. It showed a small blue world, long dead, rotating slowly in a holographic field. Beneath it, text described the conquest of Earth and the elimination of a species called humans. The date stamp indicated this had happened 60,247 years ago. "Why are you looking at that old thing?" asked his assistant, a young Krell named Torven. "That conquest was before the Dominion even left our home sector. Ancient history. Ancient history can teach us much," Vex Karn replied. He gestured at the display. "Do you know anything about humans?" Torven glanced at the information. Primitive species. Refused to submit to proper authority. They were eliminated as an example to other worlds. Standard procedure from the early expansion period. Read further, Vexkarn instructed. Torven sighed but complied. His eyes widened as he read. They kept fighting, even after their world was destroyed. It took our forces 3 months to eliminate the remaining resistance. For a primitive species, that seems unusual, Vexkarn finished. Yes. Most species surrender. Once their homeworld falls. Humans kept fighting. They fought in their orbital stations, in their moon colonies, in their asteroid bases. They fought until there was nothing left to fight with. So, they were stubborn, Torven said. What does that matter now? They've been extinct for 60,000 years. Perhaps, Vexkarn said quietly. But the records also mention that several of their large ships escaped into deep space. The pursuit was called off after a few years. It was assumed they would die in the void. And they did, Torven said confidently. No species could survive that long. Without a homeworld. Vexkarn didn't answer. He had been reviewing old records all week, ever since the reports had started coming in from the border regions. Strange sensor readings. Ships detected briefly, then vanishing. Patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose, not random phenomena. Come, he said to his assistant. We have a briefing with the Defense Council. The Defense Council met in a chamber at the top of the tallest tower on Krell Prime. 12 of the most powerful military commanders in the Dominion sat around a circular table. At the head of the table was Supreme Commander Zektar, who had held his position for over 1,000 years. Ambassador Vexkarn, Zektar greeted him, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone who had never known defeat. You requested this meeting to discuss border anomalies? Surely that's beneath the concern of the Defense Council. With respect, Supreme Commander, I believe these anomalies deserve attention, Vexkarn said. He activated a holographic display showing the outer regions of Krell space. Over the past 3 months, we've had 17 reports of unidentified ships in our territory. These ships appear briefly on sensors, then vanish. They don't respond to hails. They don't engage our patrols. They simply watch. Probably smugglers or pirates, said one of the commanders dismissively. The border regions always have such problems. These ships don't match any known designs, Vexkarn continued, and they're appearing in different sectors, thousands of light years apart. That suggests a large fleet, operating with impressive coordination. Then send more patrol ships, Zektar said impatiently. Why waste our time with this? Because I believe these ships might be human, Vexkarn said quietly. The room fell silent. Then several of the commanders began to laugh. Humans? Zektar said, amusement in his voice. Ambassador, humans have been extinct for 60,000 years. We destroyed them, personally. Their world was destroyed, Vexkarn corrected. But some of them escaped. What if they survived? Impossible, another commander said. Even if they somehow survived the initial years, they had no infrastructure, no resources, no planets. A species can't exist without a home world. We don't know that for certain, Vexkarn argued. We've never tried. We've always had our worlds, our empire. But humans were desperate. Desperation drives innovation. And 60,000 years is a long time. It's also a long time to hold a grudge, Zektar said, still smiling. Ambassador, your concern is noted, but misplaced. These sensor readings are probably nothing but equipment malfunctions or natural phenomena. The idea that humans survived and somehow became powerful enough to threaten us is fantasy. Then explain the coordinated nature of the sightings, Vexkarn pressed. Explain why our best sensors can barely detect them before they vanish. Explain why they're specifically observing our military installations and fleet positions. Perhaps you're seeing patterns where none exist, Zektar said, his patience clearly wearing thin. The Dominion has no serious threats. We are the dominant power in this galaxy. We have defeated or absorbed every rival. We have had peace for 10,000 years. Yes, Vexkarn said softly. And that peace has made us complacent. When was the last time our forces faced a real battle? When was the last time we had to fight an enemy that truly challenged us? End quote. Are you suggesting our military has grown weak? Zektar's voice turned cold. I'm suggesting we've grown comfortable. Vexkarn said. I'm suggesting that if someone did want to attack us, now would be an excellent time. Then let them come, Zektar said. The Krell Dominion has crushed every challenge for 60,000 years. If these phantom ships of yours exist, if they truly are somehow human, they'll learn the same lesson their ancestors did. We are invincible. The meeting ended shortly after. Vexkarn left the chamber feeling deeply unsettled. He had tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. They were too confident, too certain of their superiority. He returned to his office and pulled up the old files on Earth once more. He read the battle reports from 60,000 years ago. The humans had fought hard. They had used tactics the Krell had never seen before. They had adapted quickly. They had been creative, resourceful, unpredictable, and they had been primitive. If they had survived, if they had spent 60,000 years learning and growing and preparing, what would they be capable of now? Vexkarn opened a secure channel and began composing a message to the outer defense stations. He couldn't force the Defense Council to take this seriously, but he could at least try to ensure that someone was paying attention. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Krell Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The capital world of the greatest empire in the galaxy prepared for another peaceful night. In the darkness beyond the system, invisible to even the most advanced sensors, human scout ships watched and recorded. They had learned everything they needed to know. The data was transmitted back to the fleet, and the scouts began to withdraw. The Krell didn't notice them leave. They didn't notice anything at all. Not yet. The Krell military base at Sector 712 was considered one of the most important installations in the Outer Territories. It housed 3,000 warships, support facilities for 50,000 personnel, and enough firepower to sterilize 100 worlds. Base Commander Reltok believed it was completely secure. He was wrong. The attack began at exactly 0400 station time, when most of the crew was asleep. There was no warning, no declaration of war, no chance to raise shields or scramble fighters. One moment, space around the base was empty. The next, it was filled with human ships. They appeared from nowhere, their stealth systems dropping all at once in perfect coordination. Thousands of ships, each one moving with purpose and precision. They didn't look like any vessels the Krell had ever seen. They were sleek and dark, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The humans fired first. Weapons that the Krell had no names for tore through the base's defenses. Shields that had been rated to withstand planet-killing weapons simply vanished under the assault. Armor that could resist temperatures hotter than a star's core melted like ice. The base's defensive weapons tried to return fire, but the human ships moved too fast. Their maneuvers too precise. Commander Reltok watched in horror from the command center as his base was systematically destroyed. "Return fire!" he screamed. "All ships, engage the enemy!" The Krell warships that had been docked began to launch, their crews rushing to battle stations. They were some of the most advanced vessels in the Dominion fleet, equipped with weapons that had conquered 1,000 worlds. They should have been more than enough to handle any threat. They lasted less than 5 minutes. The human ships moved through the Krell fleet like predators among prey. Their weapons struck with impossible accuracy, targeting engines, power cores, command centers. Ships that had survived centuries of service exploded or went dark, drifting helplessly in space. The few Krell vessels that managed to fire back found their shots passing through empty space where human ships had been milliseconds before. "They're too fast," one of Reltok's officers shouted. "Our targeting systems can't track them." "Then fire everything," Reltok ordered. "Saturate the space around them." The Krell did exactly that, unleashing a storm of weapons fire that should have obliterated anything in the area. But the human ships danced through it all, their movements seeming almost casual. They broke into smaller groups, each group focusing on a different target. Within 30 minutes, the entire Krell defense fleet was destroyed or disabled. Then the human ships turned their attention to the base itself, but they didn't destroy it. Instead, landing craft detached from the larger vessels and headed for the station's docking bays. Reltok realized with growing dread that the humans were boarding. "Seal all entrances," he commanded. "Deploy all security forces. Prepare for ground combat." The Krell security forces were well-trained and heavily armed. They took up defensive positions throughout the base, ready to repel any boarding action. They had fought ground battles before. They knew what to do, but they had never fought humans. The human soldiers who came through the airlocks wore armor that seemed alive, shifting and adapting to their movements. They carried weapons that fired projectiles that could punch through Krell body armor like paper. They moved with inhuman speed and coordination, each soldier seeming to know exactly where their comrades were without speaking. The Krell security forces fought hard. They fought bravely, but they were outmatched in every way. The humans pushed through their defensive lines with methodical efficiency, taking control of section after section of the base. They didn't kill unnecessarily, but anyone who raised a weapon against them died instantly. Within 2 hours, the base was under human control. Commander Reltok found himself in his own command center, surrounded by human soldiers, their weapons pointed at him. He expected to be executed immediately. Instead, a human officer stepped forward. She was tall and moved with controlled grace. Her armor retracted from her head, revealing a woman with dark eyes and black hair. She looked at Reltok with an expression he couldn't read. "I am Captain Song Hai-jin of the Human Remnant Fleet," she said in perfect Krell language. "You are Commander Reltok?" "I am," Reltok said, trying to keep his voice steady. "If you're going to kill me, do it quickly." "We're not here to kill prisoners," Song Hai-jin said. "All Krell personnel who surrender will be treated according to the laws of war. You'll be detained until this conflict ends, then released unharmed." Reltok stared at her. "You're human? But humans are extinct. We destroyed you 60,000 years ago." "You destroyed our world," Song Hai-jin corrected. "But some of us escaped. We've been in the dark for 60,000 years, Commander. We've been waiting. We've been preparing. And now we've come back." "But why?" Reltok asked. "Why now? After so long?" "Because we never forgot," Song Hai-jin said simply. "Because you can't destroy a species and expect them to forgive. Because the galaxy needs to remember that humanity existed, that we mattered, that you can't just erase us from history." She gestured to her soldiers, who began leading the Krell prisoners away. Before she left, Song Hai-jin activated a holographic projector in the center of the command center. An image appeared, showing Earth as it had been before the Krell attack. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, beautiful and alive. "This is what you destroyed," she said. "This was our home. Remember it." The image shifted, showing Earth after the attack. A burned, dead world, its surface still glowing with residual heat from the weapons that had killed it. "This is what you did," Song Hai-jin continued. "Remember that too." Then she left, her soldiers following. The hologram remained, alternating between the two images of Earth, beautiful and dead, alive and destroyed. The same scene played out across a dozen Krell bases that night. Human forces struck with perfect coordination, hitting multiple targets simultaneously across thousands of light years. Every attack was a success. Every base was captured or destroyed, and everywhere they went, the humans left the same message. "We are the children of Earth. We have returned." On Krell Prime, Supreme Commander Zektar received the reports with growing disbelief. 12 bases destroyed or captured in a single night. Tens of thousands of Krell soldiers killed or captured. An enemy that moved faster, fought better, and used technology the Dominion couldn't counter. Mobilize the fleet, he ordered, his earlier arrogance gone. All available ships. We're facing a real threat. Also, the humans? One of his officers asked quietly. The humans, Zektar confirmed, his voice bitter. Ambassador Vexkarn was right. They survived. And they're not the primitive species we destroyed 60,000 years ago. Vexkarn himself stood in his office, watching the reports come in. He had tried to warn them. They hadn't listened. Now they would pay the price. But as he watched the footage of the human attacks, he noticed something interesting. The humans were fierce and efficient in battle, but they weren't cruel. They accepted surrenders. They didn't target civilians. They didn't destroy anything that wasn't military. This wasn't a campaign of extermination. This was something else, something more focused, more purposeful. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Krell. They were trying to punish them, to make them answer for ancient crimes. Vexkarn wondered if there was a way to end this before it went too far, before more people died, before the humans decided that punishment wasn't enough. In space above the conquered bases, the human fleet hung like a dark cloud. More ships were arriving every hour, emerging from the void between galaxies. The full strength of humanity's remnant fleet was gathering, and they were only just beginning. Commander Jin Seo stood alone in her private quarters, staring at a small object she held in her hands. It was a piece of Earth, a fragment of rock that had been carried aboard one of the original generation ships 60,000 years ago. Smooth from countless hands holding it over the centuries, it was one of humanity's most precious relics. She had been carrying it since the attacks began 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of constant victory. The human fleet had swept through Krell territory like a storm, destroying military installations, capturing bases, defeating every force sent against them. The Krell military, once considered invincible, was in full retreat, and Jin Seo felt nothing but emptiness. "Commander?" Captain Haewon's voice came through her door. "May I enter?" "Come in," Jin Seo said, not turning around. Haewon stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "We've received another message from the Krell. Supreme Commander Zektar is requesting a ceasefire. He wants to negotiate." "How many requests is that now?" Jin Seo asked. 7, Haewon replied. "Each one more desperate than the last. They're offering reparations, territory, technology. They're willing to acknowledge their crimes against humanity. They're willing to give us almost anything we ask for. Almost anything except bringing back the dead," Jin Seo said quietly. Haewon moved to stand beside her. The officers are divided on how to respond. Some want to accept the ceasefire. Others want to push forward until we reach Krell Prime itself. Until we make them feel the same fear our ancestors felt when their ships filled Earth's sky. "And what do you want?" Jin Seo asked. "I want to know what you want," Haewon said. "You're our commander. You've led us home. You've given us victory after victory. But I look at you, and I don't see satisfaction. I see doubt." Jin Seo finally turned to face him. "Do you know what my great-grandmother told me before she died? She was old, over 200 years. She had lived her entire life on ships, never setting foot on a planet. She had heard the stories of Earth from her grandmother, who had heard them from hers, going back through the generations." She paused, her fingers tightening around the stone. "She told me that revenge was a poison that humanity had carried for 60,000 years. She said that if we ever got the chance to go back, we needed to be careful not to let that poison destroy us. She said the Krell took our world, but we couldn't let them take our humanity too. Your great-grandmother was wise," Haewon said. "But she never saw Earth destroyed. She never felt the rage that comes from knowing your entire species was nearly wiped out." "No," Jin Seo agreed. "But she understood something important. She understood that becoming like the Krell wouldn't honor the memory of those who died. It would betray them." A soft chime interrupted them. "Commander," came Lieutenant Minjun's voice over the communication system. "You have an incoming message. Personal channel, Encrypted. The sender identifies himself as Ambassador Vex Karn of the Krell Dominion. He says it's urgent. Jinso and Haewon exchanged glances. Put him through, Jinso said. Visual. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room, showing the elderly Krell ambassador. He looked tired, his scales dulled with age and stress. Commander Jinso, Vex Karn said, his voice carrying an unexpected note of respect. Thank you for accepting my call. I wasn't certain you would. I'm listening, Jinseo said carefully. I want to speak to you not as a military representative, but as someone who has studied your species. Vex Karn said. I've spent the last 3 weeks reading everything we have about humanity. It's not much, but it's enough to understand something important. You're not here just for revenge. You destroyed our world, Jinseo said, her voice hard. You killed billions of our people. What else would we be here for? Justice. Vex Karn said simply. There's a difference. Revenge is about making us hurt as much as you hurt. Justice is about making us acknowledge what we did, making us answer for it. You've had dozens of chances to attack civilian targets, to cause maximum casualties, to make the Krell people suffer. You haven't taken any of them. You're only striking military targets. You're accepting surrenders. You're following rules of war that my own people barely remember. He leaned forward slightly. You're angry, Commander. You have every right to be. But you're not cruel. You're not monsters. And I think that's why this is so hard for you. Because part of you knows that the easy path, the path of simple revenge, isn't the right one. Jinseo was quiet for a long moment. The Krell didn't show mercy to Earth. No, Vex Karn admitted. We didn't. We were arrogant and cruel. We believed that strength gave us the right to do whatever we wanted. We were wrong. And I can't change the past. None of us can. But we can choose what happens next. And what do you think should happen next? Jinseo asked. I think you should come to Earth, Vex Karn said. I've been there. It's a dead world. But the Dominion has maintained it as a monument. We've preserved it exactly as it was after the attack. If you're going to decide the fate of my people, you should see what we did. You should stand on the world we destroyed and decide from there. Why would you suggest that? Haewon interjected. Seeing Earth destroyed would only make us angrier. Perhaps, Vex Karn said. Or perhaps it will help Commander Jinseo understand what she really wants. Is it revenge? Is it justice? Or is it something else entirely? She won't know until she sees it with her own eyes. After the call ended, Jinseo sat in silence for a long time. Haewon waited patiently, knowing she needed to work through her thoughts. What if he's right? She finally said. What if I don't know what I really want? We've spent 3,000 generations preparing for this moment. Every human alive has been raised with the story of Earth's destruction. We've built our entire civilization around the idea of coming back, of making the Krell pay. But now that we're here, now that we're winning, I feel lost. You're not lost, Haewon said gently. You're just discovering that reality is more complicated than stories. The stories made the Krell into monsters, but they're people, just like us. Flawed people who did terrible things, but still people. Does that matter? Jinseo asked. Does it change what they did? No, Haewon said. But it changes what we do next. Monsters are easy to destroy. People are harder. With people, you have to decide if you want justice or extermination. And humanity has always been better at justice than extermination. Jinseo stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden among billions of suns, was a small yellow star that had once warmed a world called Earth. Send a message to the fleet, she said. All ships are to hold position. No further attacks unless fired upon. We're going to accept the Krell's offer of negotiations. And Earth? Haewon asked. And Earth, Jinseo confirmed. Prepare a delegation. We're going to see our home world. We're going to stand on the ground where our ancestors lived and died. And then we're going to decide what justice really means. She looked down at the stone in her hand. This tiny piece of a dead world that had traveled 60,000 years through the dark. It had waited this long. It could wait a little longer. Behind her, HFY began issuing orders. The great fleet of humanity, which had swept through Krell space like an avenging angel, came to a stop. The guns fell silent. The advance halted, not because humanity had been defeated, but because humanity had chosen something harder than revenge. They had chosen to think. The journey to Earth took 3 days. Commander Jin Seo stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching the small yellow star grow larger on the viewing screen. She had seen it 1,000 times in simulations, in historical records, in the dreams passed down through generations. But this was different. This was real. Approaching Earth's solar system, reported Lieutenant Minjun. Sensors detect multiple Krell ships in the area. They appear to be withdrawing as we approach. Let them go, Jinseo said. We're not here to fight today. Captain HFY stood beside her, his expression unreadable. Behind them, a dozen of humanity's senior officers waited in silence. They had all volunteered to be part of this delegation. They all wanted to see Earth with their own eyes. As the fleet entered the inner system, a holographic image appeared showing Ambassador Vex Karn. He looked even more tired than before. Commander Jinseo, he said. On behalf of the Krell Dominion, I welcome you to the Sol system. Earth is the 3rd planet from the Sun. We have cleared all our ships from the area as requested. You may approach freely. Thank you, Ambassador. Jinseo replied. Will you be joining us? On the surface? If you'll permit it, Vex Karn said. I think there are things that need to be said, and they should be said on Earth itself. Jinseo nodded, and the communication ended. The fleet moved forward, passing the orbits of the outer planets. Jupiter, massive and ancient. Mars, red and cold. And then, ahead of them, a world that should have been blue. Earth hung in space like a wound. Its surface was dark gray, marked with scars from weapons that had burned away its oceans and atmosphere. There were still faint traces of radioactivity in some areas, even after 60,000 years. The planet rotated slowly, dead and silent. Oh, someone whispered behind Jinseo. She didn't know who. It might have been her. She had known what to expect. She had seen the recordings, studied the damage reports. But knowing and seeing were different things. This dead world had been home to billions of humans. It had been covered with cities and forests and oceans. Take us down, she said quietly. Land at the coordinates. Ambassador Vex Karn provided. The Endurance descended through the thin remnants of Earth's atmosphere. The landing site was on what had once been the eastern coast of North America, near where a city called New York had stood. Now it was just scorched rock and fused glass, the remains of buildings barely visible under 60,000 years of dust. Jinseo led the delegation out of the ship, wearing environmental suits. The surface of Earth was still barely habitable, its atmosphere too thin to breathe, its temperature swinging wildly between day and night. A small Krell shuttle was already landed nearby, and Ambassador Vex Karn stood waiting, also in an environmental suit. For a long moment, Jinseo just stood there, her boots on the ground of Earth. The ground her ancestors had walked on. The ground billions of humans had died defending. She knelt and placed her hand on the surface, feeling the rough texture through her glove. I'm home, she whispered. Behind her, she heard others crying. HFY had tears running down his face. Even the hardest soldiers, veterans of 1,000 battles, were overcome with emotion. This was what they had dreamed of for 60,000 years. This was why they had survived in the dark. Vex Karn approached slowly, respectfully keeping his distance. Commander, he said, there's something I need to show you. He led them a short distance to a structure that looked out of place among the devastation. It was made of a strange crystalline material that seemed to glow faintly. Inside, protected behind transparent walls, were artifacts from Earth's past. Pieces of art, fragments of buildings, even some preserved plant specimens that had somehow survived. After the attack, some in the Dominion argued, "We should erase all evidence of humanity," Vexkarn explained. But others thought we should preserve something, to remember what we had done. This monument has stood here for 60,000 years. Every Krell leader is required to visit it at least once during their term. We call it the Memorial of Shame. Jinseo walked through the memorial, looking at the artifacts of a dead civilization. A painting of a sunset over an ocean. A child's toy. A book. Its pages, somehow still intact. Each one, a piece of the world the Krell had destroyed. "Why?" she asked finally, turning to face Vexkarn. "Why did you do it? Why destroy an entire world?" Vexkarn was silent for a moment. "Fear," he said at last. "Our leaders were afraid of you. Humanity was primitive compared to us, but you were advancing fast. You were curious and creative and stubborn. You didn't think like other species. Our leaders decided it was safer to eliminate you than to risk you becoming a threat. It was cowardice, dressed up as strategy. And you expect that explanation to satisfy us?" Haewon said, his voice hard. "No," Vexkarn replied. "Nothing I say can satisfy what you've lost. But I can give you truth. The Krell Dominion committed a terrible crime. We murdered billions of innocent people because we were afraid. And we've spent 60,000 years pretending we were right to do it, that it was necessary, that you were somehow a threat that justified genocide." He looked directly at Jinseo. "But you've proven us wrong. You came back, and you had every right to destroy us the way we destroyed you. You had the power to do it. But you didn't. You fought only military targets. You accepted surrenders. You showed mercy even though we showed you none. That's the difference between our species. We destroyed, out of fear. You chose restraint, even in anger." Jinseo felt something break inside her. All the rage she had carried, all the desire for revenge, suddenly felt heavy and pointless. She looked out at the dead world around her, and she understood something her great-grandmother had tried to tell her. "This isn't about revenge," she said slowly. "It never was. We didn't spend 60,000 years in the dark just so we could make you hurt the way we hurt. We survived because we refused to let Earth be forgotten. We survived because we refused to let humanity end." She turned to face her officers. "The Krell thought they could erase us from history. They thought they could destroy our world, and that would be the end of it. But they were wrong. We're still here. We survived. We thrived. We became strong enough to come back. So, what now?" Haewon asked quietly. "What do we do with that strength?" Jinseo looked back at the memorial, at the fragments of Earth's past preserved in crystal. "We show the galaxy what humanity really means. We show them that you can't destroy us, that we're not defined by revenge or anger, but by persistence and hope and the refusal to give up." She turned to Vexkarn. "The Krell Dominion will acknowledge its crimes publicly. You'll provide reparations to help us rebuild. You'll withdraw from a sphere of territory around Earth, giving us room to grow. And this world, our world, will be returned to humanity so we can heal it." "Done," Vexkarn said immediately. "All of it, whatever you need. And in return," Jinseo continued, "humanity will not destroy the Dominion. We'll establish peace. We'll show the galaxy that justice doesn't require extermination. We'll prove that species can move past even the worst atrocities." "Some won't understand," Haewon said. "Some of our people wanted complete revenge. Then we'll teach them what our great-grandparents knew," Jinseo said. "That carrying poison for 60,000 years doesn't honor the dead. Living well, living freely, rebuilding our world and our species. That's how we honor them." Over the next hours, the treaty was drafted. The Krell would formally acknowledge the genocide of humanity and the destruction of Earth. They would provide resources and technology to help terraform Earth back to a living world, a process that would take centuries but was now possible. They would withdraw from 100 systems around Sol, creating a sphere of space for humanity to settle. And they would establish formal peace with the human remnant fleet. As the sun set over the dead landscape, Jinso stood alone at the edge of the memorial. She still held the small stone from Earth, carried across 60,000 years. She knelt and pressed it into the ground, leaving it there. "We made it home," she said softly to the billions who had died here. "We survived. We came back. And we chose to be better than those who hurt us. I hope that makes you proud." Behind her, human ships were already beginning to land. Engineers and scientists, families and children, all eager to set foot on Earth. It would take centuries to restore the world. But humanity had proven they could wait. They had waited 60,000 years already. In orbit, the remnant fleet began establishing permanent stations. This was no longer an invasion force. It was a homecoming. Ships that had spent millennia in the dark between galaxies finally had a sun to orbit, a world to protect. And on Earth's surface, in the memorial built by those who had destroyed it, humans and Krell stood together. They watched the sun set over a dead world that would someday live again. The age of revenge was over. The age of rebuilding had begun. And the galaxy would remember that humanity had returned, not as destroyers, but as survivors who chose mercy over vengeance. Earth was home again.